Hey guys, this is Chris with Half Chrome. The other day I went over to a local park and I tried to get through all the flight modes on this guy, the Parrot Anafi, on a single battery. All the free flight modes anyway. Then I bucked up and paid for the 2 extra flight modes, that's Waypoints and Follow Me, and tried those out on a second charge. Why trying to cram everything in on a single charge? Well, it's because I still only have one battery. Haven't been able to find a source for a battery. If you know one, please send us one or let us know where we can buy one. That'd be awesome. But anyway, took it to the park and got through them all on a single battery successfully. So today I'm going to walk you through the flight modes of the Parrot, how they work, which ones are the best, which are worth keeping, how do they compare to the flight modes on competitors like this guy, the Mavic Air, and also finally, is it worth paying the extra money for the 2 extra flight modes? Along the way, I'm going to show you some of the favorite shots that I got with this guy. There's some really cool stuff. I'm showing a couple of them right now. I'll show you how I got them as we go through the video. So stay with us. I will be right back. First up, you may be wondering why my lens looks a little funny here. It's because I've got on a filter. I don't think there's too many of these on the market yet. Freewell was nice enough to send these to us to test out. I'm going to be going over that in a video, hopefully get that released in about a week. So make sure you subscribe or check that out when it comes out. We'll let you know if these filters work out. It comes in this cool little pack here. Got 8 filters plus an ND1000. So we'll see what we can do with that guy. That's a really dark filter if you didn't know. Now first up, I'm going to talk about some of my favorite flight modes on the Anafi, which are under the touch and fly menu under piloting modes. These modes operate using GPS. So you set basically a home point on a map and use that as your reference for all of these modes. This is more like your traditional orbit or point of interest, but with some extra spins on it. So let's check them out. So first up is orbit. Unlike DJI, you do not fly over the location that you want to be the center of focus. You actually pull up a map, and as you can see here, at first I didn't actually have data on. I had it set in airplane mode so I wouldn't get disturbed, but that's not going to give you the map that you want. So for these, you're going to want to leave your data plan running and just silence your phone, I guess. So once you have identified the center of location, you'll notice this little bar over on the right hand side of the screen. That sort of sets the altitude, I guess, that is the focal point for the view. Because in these modes, you unfortunately don't have control over the gimbal. You set it kind of with this slider on the side. So I think what that's doing is setting the altitude. That is really the point of focus for the camera. It's kind of jittery to slide it up and down. I wish we still had gimbal control angle here. But regardless, it tends to choose well the first time. I pick a point, and I don't usually mess with that setting. It seems to do a good job anyway. So orbit is very simple. It's your traditional orbit or point of interest in DJI lingo. Circles around a point at a fixed altitude. Now in these modes, as I mentioned, you don't have much control over the drone in terms of yaw angle or gimbal angle. So you get what you get, but what you get is usually exactly what you want. Next up is tornado. In this mode, you're flying up and backwards away as you do your orbit. This is a really nice mode, but you don't have control over the speed, and that's probably a good thing because it's going to tend to get smoother footage by not cranking it up too high, which can be a problem here in windy conditions or flying too fast sideways. You can run out of gimbal travel. But the downside is it can take forever. So I actually cut a lot of these modes short because, as I mentioned before, I only had one battery. The tornado could be a very useful mode if you really want to circle an object while moving further away, get more perspective as you go, but I see you always speeding this one up in post-production. You can set the camera setting to be more of a time lapse, But regardless, you're going to need to speed it up one way or another probably, because it just takes forever to go all the way around. Okay, next up is probably my favorite in this group, which is Parabola. This is one I haven't seen before. This happens to be a mode that would be very difficult to replicate, at least with a single pilot control system on your own. So in this one, you can set the height. The Anafi flies up and over the point of interest, and as it goes, it rotates around, always keeping the camera pointed. And so as it comes back down, the gimbal moves up again. You can get, as you can see here, some pretty cool shots like this if you have a nice focal point. Buildings, I think, are a pretty obvious one for this mode. Finally, you have the Boomerang. This is basically a Dronie just flying up and away, straight backwards, away from the point of interest. Gimbal, the camera, always pointed at it. And I think it sets the angle in terms of how much elevation you get as you back up based on the camera angle or where the drone is initially positioned with regard to that point of interest, which is a three-dimensional point of interest in the Anafi world, as far as I can tell. So anyway, it flies backwards. As you're going to see, boomerangs and dronies are is a theme that's going to come up more than once as we go through these modes. There's lots of versions of this. This particular one flies out and then back. So I guess you can pick in post-production without having to reverse it, which you prefer, or you can do the whole thing, I guess. So to wrap up this group of modes, do I like them? I really do. I like having a lot of GPS point of interest based modes. This is in stark contrast to drones like the Spark. DJI chose to unfortunately really omit that. They don't even have a GPS based orbit, which is sort of a criminal omission in my point. So I'm happy to see a lot of these point of interest modes, so people can do a single click and get a variety of different options here. And I really do like the Parabola. It's a new thing, haven't seen it before, and I think I'm going to enjoy using that in the future. A couple downside to these modes. As I mentioned before, you do need data if you want to see that map, so you need to have that turned on. So that's one minor point. A bigger downside probably is that you don't have any control over the gimbal or the drone when you fly in these modes. You just kind of stand back and watch. Good point, always remember where that stop button is. Sometimes there's a couple ways to exit these modes. It's always the first thing you should be looking for when you start one of these modes. It's how do you cancel out of it in case you're getting close to a tree or you're just getting bored waiting for it to finish a really long mode. Alright, so now let's talk about another one of my favorites, which is the Cameraman. And Cameraman, this is kind of like active track spotlight that we've seen in some of the DJI drones. It's an optical tracking mode, so you highlight a visual point of interest, a subject, and in this version from Parrot is actually my favorite that I've seen so far. So the drone takes over at that point in terms of gimbal angle and yaw, but you can still pan the drone, move up and down, and move closer and further from the subject. And what the camera tries to do, the gimbal, is it tries to keep that subject centered at all times. Now what's really cool with the Parrot and why I'm using this mode a lot is the Parrot, Anafi, has that lookup angle. So you can even start from below the object or move above to below it, and it'll track that whole time. I've had a lot of fun playing with this. It's probably one of my favorite modes on the Anafi. In my opinion, it is more effective and easier to use than a lot of the active track modes from DJI. I love to try to use this mode starting looking up and doing kind of this reverse reveal thing where you have this subject high up where you initially can't tell where it is, how high you are above the ground, and as you move higher with the drone and the camera tilts down, you kind of reveal where you are, what your height is, and what the subject matter around it is. I've done it with this church steeple here, and we did it a while back looking up at actually this guy here, the Phantom 4. When you start seeing a shot like that, your initial thought is it's just a video taken from the ground, maybe with a zoom lens, but then you see it come up and you realize this is actually a shot taken from a drone, a shot you couldn't get really with any drone other than this guy with its lookup angle. So I really utilize the Cameraman a lot for that. Now you will start to see some issues with this mode, what I call head bobbing. So you see the gimbal moving up and down sometimes. I'm speeding up this orbit here. This is not an actual orbit. What I was doing in this flight was just holding the right stick all the way over to the side, letting the drone circle around and maintain a constant distance from the subject. I did a good job doing that, but you'll notice the head bobbing effect. I hope Parrot does an update and improves on that in the near future. Excuse me. As I was saying, I hope Anafi improves on it a bit, because I'd love to use this mode even more. Even with its current limitations, I'm still using this mode a lot. I'm able to get some complex motions that would be really hard to do with, quite frankly, not the most sensitive controls on the Anafi remote, but also without a second pilot. I mean, these are pretty complex motions I'm achieving here with really simple gimbal controls and letting the drone take over for the rest. All right, on to smart dronies. So first up is the Dolly zoom. This one is pretty sweet, really fun, and really this is another area where the Anafi is up ahead of the competition, DJI, in releasing a built-in Dolly zoom feature. Now you might wonder why DJI hasn't done this yet, and it's because they don't have zoom. Now how does Parrot do that? They do it with this 21 megapixel sensor that allows you in 1080 to do 3x digital zoom that is lossless in full HD 1080, and that's how they're able to do it. DJI is still supplying 12 megapixel sensors. They're not going to really be able to do that digitally, but we do see the Mavic 2 zoom leaked images indicating there'll be a Dolly zoom there. I hope it's more than 2x. I hope they add some digital on that. You could do 2x digital even with your 12 megapixels to get a 4x Dolly zoom. That's going to beat this guy out. But regardless, Dolly zoom, fun feature, cool feature. Love that they included it here. We do have some issues trying to line up subjects other than the pilot. You can see in this shot that we were able to get Jack, who was maybe 6 feet to the side of me. But lining up subjects that are facing the other direction, for example, it tends to kind of fall out of that mode and get confused, and I'm not sure why. It likes to face the remote in this. I hope they resolve that. I'd like to be able to Dolly zoom other subjects more easily. The other mode you see in smart dronies is yet another Boomerang. With this one, instead of using a GPS location as the center of focus, we're actually using a visual point of focus or a subject. But it basically operates the same. Again, Boomerang type shots showing up all over the place in these menus. But, you know, it's here. It works. I had to stop mine short because it was flying straight back. So the good, the bad for these guys, as I mentioned, love to have a little more zoom. I'm hoping the Mavic 2 zoom will have that feature in terms of the Dolly and zoom in general. And I don't like that it's hard to get Dolly zoom to work on subjects other than the pilot. So now we've gone through touch and fly, we've gone through Cameraman, and we've gone through smart dronies. We've got another piloting mode here, which they call Cineshots. Now this is probably some of the least interesting shots, some of the most that are easy to replicate by hand using just joysticks without a whole lot of skill, but let's go through them quickly. First up is the 360. You don't have control over the speed. Basically the drone just sits there and spins around really slowly. I actually think I let this one run the full way through, but I'm counting the seconds. Next up is the reveal. This is probably the best of these modes. I got a really sweet shot with this. It's something you can do manually, but you'll have to be really careful with the gimbal controls not to move too quickly or in a too jittery of a way. And with this mode, it does it nice and smooth. Got a really good shot with it of the fountain. Next up is the rise. This is sort of a reverse reveal mixed with a 360 at the end, which you can't tell just by looking at the icon. So the drone flies up one of two set heights that you can pick, and as it goes, the gimbal looks up, and then it starts circling around kind of as the camera is almost all the way looking up, and then you got to wait forever for it to do a circle up there. I don't imagine ever using it. It's hard to predict exactly where it's going to be looking during that circle. Not my favorite mode. Don't see myself using this one. Next up is the Epic. This is basically another Droney. It flies backwards. It flies up a little bit. I'm not sure all the differences here, but this one isn't based on anything other than I think the initial drone's orientation. It's not tracking a subject. It is not focused on a GPS location. So there you have it. One more Droney type shot. The good thing about some of these modes is they do help do some nice smooth motions, which can be a bit of a challenge for beginners, or given the fact that the control on the Anafi, particularly the gimbal control, isn't the easiest to get smooth action from. The bad thing is they take a really long time, several of them, and they are fairly easy to replicate for the most part. But that being said, I do think I will be using the reveal, and check it out one more time here. This is the best shot I got with these modes. Okay, that is it for the free modes that come with your Anafi. So let's move on to the paid modes and find out if they are worth your time and money. So starting off, let's take a look at Waypoints. So this works a bit different than it does for DJI and Unique drones. So in those modes from DJI and Unique, you typically fly the drone to a location in space, sometimes also paying attention to the yaw of the drone, maybe even gimbal angle, and you set a waypoint. So if you want to use waypoints for cinematic views and nice sweeping vistas, that sort of stuff, I do recommend the Anafi for that. You can see in the app, as you set these points and you set the heights at them, you set the altitude that you want it to be for each location. You'll see also you get these little white arrows that indicate the direction the drone is going to be facing. What it does is the Anafi anticipates that it's going to be turning, so it actually starts to rotate before it gets to a corner of your waypoint map. And that's a really nice feature. I really like that. I see that as being a much better use case if you're into doing cinematic stuff for using waypoints. I think they did a good job there. Now it is different. You are using the map, and so you won't be able to anticipate always what the views are going to look like in the same way you would if you're actually flying the locations like you would with a DJI drone. While you're flying, unlike many of the Anafi modes, you do have control of gimbal angle and zoom during the flight, so that's really nice, but you don't have control over yaw. So what would I like to see different in waypoints? I would like to be able to control the yaw of the drone as I go. And a small disadvantage is you don't really know what you're going to get until you go and fly the route, which is different than what people may be used to for DJI. But I really do like the anticipation the drone has of where it needs to be looking and going around these waypoints in a really nice, smooth kind of way. All right, last but not least, let's talk about Follow Me. So Follow Me promises to follow you. The drone's going to lock on you visually and track you. Now, if you're used to active track on DJI, you know that it doesn't always keep up with you. It frequently loses its subjects. Now, that is not any different on the Anafi. Frequently loses you visually. But one major bonus here is it's actually a dual tracking system. As soon as it loses you visually and it figures that out, it's just going to keep following you using GPS, assuming you have the remote on you. Now, for whatever reason, on the Mavic Air, there is no GPS-based tracking Follow Me function. So here it's nice, it's sort of dual function, typically just takes over seamlessly and keeps following you. As you can see, we're following the car around this affluent neighborhood here and not having any issues keeping up with it. We did speed up to around 40 miles an hour at some point in this drive, and the drone did not quite keep up, but it did keep tracking. Keeps the gimbal pointed right on subject and keeps doing its best to keep up and does a pretty darn good job. This guy can actually fly pretty fast. What's good about this? It's the fact that it can fall back and rely on GPS, assuming you've got the remote with you. What's bad is the tracking's really not any better than active track from DJI. We hope that's about to change. So we've seen the leaked images from DJI. They're branding Active Track differently. They're not just saying it's improved, they're calling it Active Track 2.0. We hope there's a real benefit there. But for now, we're happy just to get the GPS combined with the vision-based tracking. So we call it a win for the Parrot over the Air in that category. All right, just to wrap it up, let's go quickly through some of my favorite modes. So number one is probably Cameraman. It's easy to use and I'm able to get shots I wouldn't otherwise get. I do hope that Parrot gives us a firmware update and improves on it to get rid of the head nodding issues, but I did find it to track my subjects well and I found it to be very useful. I will be using it more. Next up is Parabola. It's a mode that we have not seen before, at least I haven't in any other drones, and it's a unique mode. It's hard to replicate manually and it gets some really cool unique shots of subjects like buildings, maybe cars, other things like that. I probably will be using Reveal. It's nice and silky smooth, and a Reveal is one of the most utilized and best shots you can get with the drone. So finally, are Waypoints and Follow Me worth it? I would say probably not unless you have a really specific need. Me personally, I like to mountain bike. Am I going to use Follow Me for that? I've got no obstacle avoidance on this guy, and I'd have to have the remote turned on and on me to really get realistic tracking. At least it's going to stay with me, but I don't really want to put the remote in my backpack with the gimbals, the sticks bumping into things. It's just bad news. Really the only practical application I can think of is in a car where you're going to have the passenger maybe holding things, monitoring things as you drive. So if you really want follow me shots from a vehicle, I'd recommend it. Or if you can think of other use cases, go for it. It's 18 bucks, at least in the US. Maybe you're gonna like it. As for Waypoints, if you see yourself mapping out missions like that and wanting some cinematic views, I really do like this functionality. It is, in my opinion, better for a lot of things than the features I've seen on other drones from Unique and DJI. So that's it for flight modes. I hope this video was helpful. Make sure you check us out next time. We're going to be reviewing these filters and some other gadgets we got from Freewell. Make sure you also check out our other Anafi videos, like our more detailed comparison to this guy, the Mavic Air. Please subscribe, check us out at halfchrome.com, and we'll see you next time. This one, instead of having a GPS location as the center of focus,